Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Honorable Joe Cueto, for that presentation. And I will basically be connecting to that particular presentation. So I was tasked to provide input on the basic remote teaching competencies for health professions education. And I think Honorable Cueto provided a very comprehensive background to which we can work with or from. So let's start with my apprehension in relation to the way things have been going on and the way some discussions are going on with some colleagues, both in the local and international community. For so long, for several decades, we have been trying to develop our faculty members to be enablers or facilitators of learning. But maybe the absence or limited face-to-face sessions may bring us back to traditional role of dispenser of information, because suddenly we are not able to facilitate, although probably traditional dispenser of information. So that we have to start from that perspective that we may be utilizing digital platform, but are we able to maximize the platform to still initiate conversation, to still be able to ensure that integrative learning is achieved by our learners? So that's a major challenge. So that's my apprehension, but I'm also very optimistic because of the things that we're doing in the NTTC, helping faculty members and students understand that we can do the same things, we can achieve the same things, even if we do change the way of delivering the program we designed. So let me go back again to the context. So our context, of course, is COVID-19. And COVID-19, as mentioned, both from the opening, the inspirational message of our dear Chancellor, the Dean, and of course, Honorable Cueto, you talk about this context, basically providing us with or more or less pressured. No, that's not correct anymore, because this is now the new normal. Forced, maybe, but basically we have no other choice but to go to flexible learning. And it's important that before we talk even about the basic competencies, we need to understand a little bit about this flexible learning and how it would impact on the way, for example, we design or to select competencies that we need to do. So just a little bit, maybe 5 minutes on flexible learning. So when we talk about flexible learning, you know that flexible learning is basically a student biased learning, meaning we do the learning in the context of the characteristic of our students, to address the personal flexibility of our students, to also provide opportunity for students to select what they want to learn at a particular period of time. And that would also mean requiring that our institutions have institutional agility, balancing between synchronous, asynchronous, between face-to-face sessions or to online sessions. And it would also require balanced pragmatism in relation to our own educational philosophy. As I always say before, quoting from one famous educator, we cannot change our pedagogy unless we change our epistemology. Meaning we cannot change or accept probably innovations unless we accept the fact that there are philosophical base or there are cognitive bases for all the changes that we're going through. We're going through this not just because there's COVID. We're going through this because it's the right thing to do, with or without COVID. And therefore, when you talk about delivering programs within the flexible learning, I actually decided to use the flexible learning instead as the key, because most of the guidelines, as mentioned by Honorable Cueto and of course by our Chancellor, that the thing is into the flexible learning thing. And we have 4 issues that we need to deal with. And on the perspective of us doing health professions education, we talk about what the students will learn. Honorable Cueto talk about some issues related to guidelines, proclamations, and what the students are doing, and will that be enough to, for example, develop the clinical competencies. As he mentioned, some students are afraid of the board exam because there might be questions that they were not able to cover, or there are competencies they were not able to develop because of the absence of actual clinical interaction with patients. So we know what the outcome should be. That's the what. Now the big issue is, how do we deliver them? Can we still achieve the same outcome under the new normal? Is it possible to still develop clinical competencies with minimal exposure to clinical cases? The next is, when do we do that? For example, in the College of Medicine, an internship, they say there's delay. Like yesterday, I was with the PGIs of UPGH online session. And of course, the PGIs will not come back or will not be rotating in PGH till after 2 months, I guess. So now, right now, they are all over the place in their own hometown or wherever they are. And they will just be receiving instead online lectures, tutorials that will probably help them more ready when they eventually be called on duty or for duty at PGH, and at the same time preparing for the upcoming board examination in 2021. So can we delay, for example, clinical skills, and instead focus in this year, when we don't have any of the face-to-face, to more knowing what, knowing how, instead of doing things? And of course, where will we do it? Now we know we can do it in so many other places. And that's the thing when you talk about this particular flexible learning issues. And to address all of this, therefore, our institutional response will not just be focused on curricular issues, but also the technology that will enhance the learning in terms of what. This is what they will know. How they will know it. How will they learn it? What technology will be used to enhance the learning, even in the absence of actual clinical cases? What pedagogical approaches can we utilize? Are there traditional methods that are still very useful? I'm sure. Actually, we don't recommend that you get out of your traditional methods or traditional micro skills like facilitating, mentoring, because this can all be done in a certain environment. And as Professor Cueto, Honorable Cueto mentioned, there's another thing, employment. Will the employment or employers accept a graduate who did not go through several on-the-job exposures? Like say, are you willing to accept doctors with minimal rotations? But anyway, they have to graduate. Will you accept a midwife, as Joe was saying earlier, who instead of doing 20 sutures or 20 deliveries will just have to deal with 5 deliveries? Will the employer be willing to do that? because we have changed our pedagogy. But are the employers ready to welcome them? And of course, the institutional systems and structures that are needed. As our Madam Chancellor mentioned in the opening, in the inspirational message, it's not just about developing the VLE, for example, but it's also about developing other institutional support system like loans and everything to just to provide our faculty with the technology available to them. And of course, within this perspective, we talk about digital technology enhanced learning. We talk about digital literacies, mobile learning, learning spaces, learning analytics. When you go to pedagogical approaches, student transitions, do we really need a semester change? Do we really need to call now? Do we really need to have now a semestral break? Or we can go into modular system where semestral break is not anymore an issue. That semester is not anymore the boundary for measurement or for achievement of a certain outcome. How do we value personal learning, for example, at this particular point? And in terms, as I said earlier, in terms of employment here, in terms of global employment, flexible working are all there be addressed. And as I said, with the institutional infrastructure, that will be recruitment. Will you be recruiting just recruiting faculty members because they are good? We have good clinical experience, or we will also be recruiting faculty not only with good clinical experience but also technically enhanced and therefore ready to more or less enhance your e-learning platform as an institution. So for identifying remote learning or what you call it, flexible learning competencies, I will focus my attention to this one because it's basically where we will be able to make some use of the technology. The one on the left side that I just removed, basically are the institutional responses and probably the responses at the employer side. But to be able to be responsive to the left side, we need to develop competencies that will be able to achieve what we have on the other half of the circle. And to do that, I will start by going into the international standard from the Society of Technology in Education. So therefore, if we are to really move into, or as we are already actually marching towards flexible learning, all of us educators, all of us, including students actually, all of us managers, will have to have general role to play. As our eHPEd students know, you don't just define competencies by going to very specific skills that you can perform, but you start by defining the roles that we have to play in the context of implementing a technology-based learning. So we have to be learners. We have to be leaders. We have to be citizen. We have to be collaborator. We have to be designer, facilitator, and of course, analyst. Let us quickly go through all of this, and at the same time, in between, I will already inject the basic competencies that I think would be needed to perform these roles. I would like to remind the listeners or the participants that we will not be really going to very specific competencies. This is not the objective of this presentation, but rather to identify general areas where probably we will be able to, or general areas that we can address both at the individual level and at the institutional level. Now let's go a little bit to being learner. To be learners, We have to set professional learning goals to explore and apply pedagogical approaches made possible by technology and reflect on their effectiveness. So we have to continue identifying our goals in the light of all these changes. We have to pursue our professional interests by creating and actively participating in local and global learning networks. Our faculty here in NTTC, for example, been sharing international conference for the last 1 month or so, or 2 months, with international free online courses on health professions ed. And whenever it's possible, we try to participate in all this, because we cannot be static in all this, and we have to stay current in terms of how we can improve student learning outcomes. Maybe you are assessing students, as Honorable Cueto mentioned, a challenge is the new assessment protocol. Maybe you have been so comfortable with the teaching and grading methodology or process that we use, that you fail to realize that there are other new innovative assessments. And if you visit our course site this afternoon when we open our video, you will be able to see, for example, several lectures there, video lectures. One of the lecture, for example, is on entrustable professional. I forgot that, Betchay, but maybe they will learn about it later. EPA, that's the EPA. So we need to be leaders, right? We need to shape, advance, and accelerate a shared vision for empowered learning. And I'm happy that entities is doing that. We share the same appreciation of the empowering role of technology in learning. We do not shy away from experimenting of possible technology and how they can probably improve our learning. We have to advocate for equitable access to educational technology. Joe was telling us about possible scenario and possible issue with equitability, to the point of even like medicine dividing or categorizing students into 3. In the current debate on equality, that may not be acceptable, because as much as possible, we don't want students to be labeled in these categories. Maybe probably instead of just labeling them, we make sure that what they don't have will be made available. And of course, we role model. Don't talk about just being, we love technology, but we're not actually running our own learning management system. We love technology, but we are shying away from innovative engagement, for example, or innovative way of curating information. So we have to change the role from being the content expert to the developer of lifelong learning. We have to be leaders in this discussion, not only at the local level, but also at the international level. And as Chancellor mentioned, indeed, NTTC has made a very important contribution in the ASEAN region in relation to the eHPEd, or the health professions education. Now, another standard in the ST that we need to play a role would be citizen. We need to be the citizen of the, as I mentioned before, we have leaders and models, but we are not just leaders. We also should be a global citizen, building relationship with other people. We should establish a learning culture that promotes curiosity and critical examination. Not just because we shifted to flexible learning that we will abandon all the other critical thinking competency development that we're supposed to address. Not just because we now are into digital age and we just deliver programs and let the student think about them. Critical thinking don't just happen. Critical thinking will have to be triggered. And we should have that culture of triggering, even in the context of flexible learning. And also as a citizen, we need to mentor students in the safe, legal, and ethical practices with digital tools. You try to say, I don't want to share my slides to my students, but at the same time, you also have actually borrowed some content of your slides online without necessarily adding or citing the source. You want to tell the student, be safe with your data, but you're probably not safe with what you're doing in your Facebook page messages or posting. That's why you're being now reminded of be careful with sharing your Google Drive. Be careful with sharing your Zoom account, or be careful with sharing your other online accounts. And of course, we have to model and promote management of personal data and digital data, both in the context. How do we safeguard them? So we model this particular situation. Now let's go to now basically now play in terms of what we can do and what methodology or technology we can do. Earlier we talked about leadership, citizenship, sort of thing. But now we'll talk about us as being collaborators. And as collaborator, we dedicate time to collaborate with both colleagues and students to improve practice, discover and share resources, ideas, and solve problems. You will see in the picture here, NTTC doing weekly kumustahan o kamustahan. We try to meet our students, share with them, discuss with their apprehensions, discuss their issues, and help them process through our student psychiatrists, what do you call it? In-house psychiatrists to basically address some of the issues we're facing, both at the academic and the personal nature or the impact of pandemic to us, even in the context of being isolated. So to do that, I just decided to just do this illustrations. On the top will be what we should know, and at the bottom will be what we can do, what we should be good at. So of course, we now at this point, to be collaborators, basic competencies. Probably you should be able to know about the basic principles, guidelines, and the how-tos of Zoom meetings, Google Meet, Big Blue Button available in our VLE, Cisco WebEx, so many others, Lark, and all other LMS available for us for online meetings. And as I said, on the top, these are the things you should know. What are they? But at the bottom, this will be common basic. You should know how to connect to the internet. You should know how to use your camera. You should know how to use your microphone well and record or document your audio files. And of course, you need to collaborate online with others, but at the same time being careful in recognizing emotions, in recognizing biases that may accidentally be coming out of discussions. And we have to be very sure that we properly follow, therefore, the etiquettes or the digital or online guidelines in terms of talking or collaborating. And we are designers. To me, you cannot use technology well if you don't design courses well. That's just basic in NTTC. You don't just go online You need to design authentic learner-driven activities and environment that recognize and accommodate learner variability. That's why it's basic. You don't go to instructional media without finishing instructional design or curriculum design. You should be familiar with facilitating skills. And you need to make sure that your design would engage your digital age learners. And that would mean we need to be reminded what learning is all about. That learning is active, constructive process. That learning is integration. That learning is creating new knowledge. And we should not abandon this very basic principle of learning in our delivery of learning at the online or flexible learning environment. We cannot sacrifice, or we cannot basically prioritize just technology. We need to prioritize learning. And again, we need to be reminded that our digital platform should be able to move our knowledge dimension from remember to create. Flexible learning, enhanced learning, remote learning environment is not a limitation for ensuring that we achieve the highest level of achievement up to the level of create. And also, we need to remember that when we develop materials, whatever method you use, whatever competencies you have, to go back to the basic Gagne's 9 general steps of instruction for learning, that your methods, your design should help gain student attention, that it should be able to describe the goal. It should stimulate, recall prior knowledge before you even present the materials to be learned. Honorable Cueto presented that ladder earlier in his presentation on the learning management system on the online side. No? But see here, you have to present, and then you make sure that you have to provide guidance for learning, elicit performance and practice. Well, we're saying, what if it's a person, what is clinical skills? Well, you can actually make them practice. They can watch video. They can send you their own video of how they perform it. And you can actually do online critiquing. Professor Grajeda did that in her practicum program with Cebu, where she cannot always be in Cebu, but basically she just requested the student to record their own teaching experiences, and then together the group will critique on how they perform on the steps, the micro skills. We provide informative feedback, and of course, assess. Not because we're offline or we're online, we don't assess anymore, and at the end of the day, all of this will enhance retention and transfer. So all the apprehensions related to the utilization of flexible learning or remote learning environment can actually be addressed if we as teachers follow or be reminded of the very basic principles of teaching. Technology is technology, but never abandon. As I said earlier, you cannot improve your pedagogy unless you improve your epistemology. And that make sure that in the clinical cycle, that our learning experience, even at the online or flexible learning, would still provide the clinical encounter experience. Honorable Cueto shared about the nursing case, online case studies. There are so many other simulation software available in the market. And it can help us still make the students go through all the cycle. We can always simulate case scenarios. We don't have to have real patient to appreciate. You have to remember that exposure to patient is not a guarantee for learning clinical skills. It is actually the availability of feedback through the briefing, reflection that you can improve. That's what I mean. Sometimes you can actually do 10 surgeries, but you can do the 10 surgeries the wrong way without receiving a feedback. But another student may do only 4 surgeries. But during the 4 surgeries, he was receiving all the available feedback, all the available mentoring, all the available coaching he needs. See, it's not just about numbers. It's about if this experiential learning cycle is being practiced, be it in the online or be it in the regular platform. Okay. So that would help you, therefore, identify materials that you will use in the course. It's not always that. It will always be a video. It could be a movie. It could be just link to a web-based resource material. It could even be watching just a history channel or knowledge channel on developing online books. It's not always that the course will have all the resources, digital resources it requires, because that may not be needed for a certain identified competencies or the achievement of a certain outcome. So, again, in relation to knows and does or doing, you probably should be able to be familiar with or know about how to produce a multimedia material, how to convert your PowerPoint into video, how to use your cell phone to develop instructional video materials, how to use student cell phone to evaluate clinical skills. You can ask them to do collaborative projects. You can use interactive videos. You even develop interactive learning objects using the free H5P application, which is available in our virtual learning environment and in Moodle. And of course, in terms of the tools, you can see below, cell phone, again, you talk about how, some of us may take for granted the importance of a microphone, the importance of your good earphone, the importance of a good camera, and of course, you should be able to share the design material to the cloud. So you should know what a cloud is. It's not the thing that give you rain, but the new cloud is something where you store materials in the World Wide Web that you can retrieve together with your students later on in different platforms. Now, we are also facilitators. Will flexible learning remove us from that? No, actually, we need more facilitating skills. As I said earlier, from the very beginning, we are not to surrender the major micro skills that we are using in our regular format, in our regular face-to-face. Facilitating is an essential skill that should be magnified or should be utilized very well in the online platform. We will facilitate on how students manage their technology, how we develop and strategize on what digital platforms we can use, the virtual learning environments, the maker spaces, and all the others. And of course, we create learning opportunities that challenge students to use a design process and computational thinking to innovate and solve problems. And again, a little bit of just enrichment. If you are to meet, therefore, the needs of our digital learners, then we must not only develop what they know, but also how they know. So that would mean even we are moving into a flexible learning platform, we are not giving up on making sure that in the Bloom's taxonomy, we go from knowing, we go from remember to creating. We can become learning coaches, but will be experts in figuring out, along with their students, how to do something, how to find out something, or how to use something to do something new. As I always show this example of us doing our eHPEd thesis defense remotely. We've been doing this for the last, this happened 3 or 4 years ago. Our master students in Cambodia, giving their defense, doing their defense online. And of course, as I said, again, what do we need? As facilitators, we should be knowledgeable of how to set up online conferencing applications. We need to be able to manage online or virtual conferences, plus writing other modules that would ensure that they should be able to do that, and that means should be able to have knowledge, the doing in relation again to setting up your computers, connecting to the internet, setting up your camera audio again, and practicing the good ethics in online conferencing. And the last, we have our role is to be analyst. We need to provide and design variety of summative approaches. So we need to talk to our students. We need to, now the debate is, well, how do we grade our students? Is it a pass-fail issue? What is it? What about going back to the very basic discussion of minimum competency learning? What is the minimally competent requirement so that you think that public will accept the graduates? Well, it's not always about the highest competency that you can achieve, because you remember, not all competencies can be achieved in our learning programs. There are competencies that develop through time. We call them developmental outcomes. We have intended outcomes in our classrooms or in our sessions, but there are developmental outcomes that could not just be achieved sitting in a chair or watching a video. This learning, that's why we have the lifelong learning issues. What is important is the minimal competency requirement so that they can continue learning on their own. And we need to, now with online, actually the beauty with online thing, with the flexible and all this remote learning, is that we have more data that we can mine, more data that we can assess, more data that we can use in analyzing problems, in identifying mentorship priorities, in identifying materials that probably need more improvement, and the like. So on the positive side, this is very important. So therefore, we probably would need to know more about Google Form, Moodle Quiz Activity Block, Gamify applications. Our Dean, I like our Dean Melflor always using game application to perk up the discussion, and of course to, especially if we're at the period where our participants are already like sleepy or something, or to trigger interest. There are so many quiz maker applications available, and therefore again, we need just the same basic competencies. Probably you just have to bring your basic test competencies, writing competencies, to the online platform. You don't, again, abandon the very basic principles of testing, that you ask the most important questions, that you use the best format for the outcome that you want, and that you make appropriate scaling for the decisions you have to make, that you have to differentiate between a formative and a summative decision. These are important in relation to that kind of understanding. So in summary of the learning standards, talk about the learner and the international standards being we as learners, leaders, citizen, collaborator, designer, facilitator, analyst. And in each of this role that we have to play will be some, we discuss responsibilities. And within that particular responsibility, we talk about knowledge that you need to know, and the skills that you need, so that we can play a holistic role in the use of technology in education, especially in the context of flexible learning, remote learning, or other online learning name that you want to use. So I said, this is what you will get. So from the standards, you need them for remote teaching. And of course, again, the context, pandemic is on us. We moved to flexible learning, but we can always learn as one. For the non-NTTC VLE user, we have a new platform for you to be part of the conference using the NTTC HP oc.upn.edu.ph for those who are not VLE accredited. So that's my input for today. Good morning, and thank you very much.